Here live at the Camp Harmony Remembrance ceremony that honors the Japanese internment that happened at the Puyallup Fairgrounds. Now, then it was called Camp Harmony or the Puyallup Assembly Center.
Welcome everyone. If you could please find a place, we are ready to begin. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Leslie Stoll, and I'm here to introduce two taiko groups today. We have Suji Taiko from Tacoma and Seattle Matsuri Taiko from Seattle. And we're going to play two pieces for you. The first one is called Matsuri. It's a traditional song, but was introduced to North America by Grandmaster Seiji Tanaka, also known as Tanaka Sensei. And then our second piece is, oh, can't hear me? No. Oh, thank you. Does it? Okay, sorry. It's hard to speak with these on. All right. So two pieces, Matsuri, which is a traditional piece that was taught to North American taiko groups by Seiji Tanaka. And our second piece is called Pulsate, written by two groups in Seattle, Inochi Taiko and One World Taiko. So please enjoy.
you being here. My name is Becky Condra. I am the current president of Arts Downtown. Arts Downtown is an all-volunteer nonprofit organization that manages the Outdoor Sculpture Gallery in Puyallup. We also manage 2 fine art galleries, one in the Activity Center and one in the 5th floor of City Hall. This beautiful sculpture, Camp Harmony, was part of our rotating gallery for 2 years. And last April, it was due to leave the community, and we just couldn't have that. We felt so strongly that it needed to stay here because of its strong ties to the history of Puyallup. So in February, we purchased it and we donated it to the city. That makes 51 pieces now in our permanent gallery. Thank you. So, we usually don't have big public events like this when we donate a piece to the city, but this piece is different. This piece commemorates not only a part of Puyallup's history, but it also commemorates a grave injustice that was done to the Japanese American community. And so for these reasons, we felt a moral obligation to take time this afternoon not only to remember a part of Puyallup's history, but also to celebrate and honor the Japanese American culture. So, that being said, let us begin with John Zylstra, who is the talented artist who created this beautiful sculpture.
Well, thank you. It's a bit of an honor for me to be here today. And Becky told me I had about an hour and a half. There are a lot of things that runs through someone's mind, and there's a lot of background and things we could talk about today. What I was originally asked to do is talk a little bit about the inspiration. Why the heck did you do this thing, right? So, probably the easiest thing to do is, I'll be a chicken and just read something from my initial artist statement, okay? And then we'll clear a couple of things up after that.
Get closer to the mic.
Yes.
All right. Camp Harmony serves as a warning to be ever vigilant regarding conclusions drawn too quickly and specific assessments made of the human condition. We must be cautious to separate what is real from what is perceived with our actions driven by our sense of humanity and justice. It is not my purpose to condemn or point fingers historically, rather encourage continued discussions of larger social issues today. A lot of times you'll hear things like that and you'll see this kind of amorphic shape, ground stainless steel and all that, and you're supposed to figure that out for yourself. This particular piece is very specific. It's specific about culture, a time, and a place. And if you look closely, there are embedded images here. There's like a temple roof line. There's a doorway. There's a panel, a shoji type of panel, and there's the maple tree and leaf against the full moon. But that's not the whole story. On the bottom you see barbed wire, and those images tend to fight with one another. They don't really connect up properly unless you look at a particular time and place. Speaking of time. So, for today and forward, in my mind, this piece represents a point in time and a place to pause and remember. Remember the transition camp here, and remember the people that went through that doorway, if you will. Okay? So, thank you.
hopefully that'll help a little bit. Thanks. Thank you, John. Thanks for your words of wisdom, and thank you for your wonderful talent. Next, I would like to introduce to you an individual who was very critical in making today happen. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Eileen Yamada Lamphir, who is the president of the Puyallup Valley chapter of the Japanese American Citizens League.
Thank you, Becky. Before I continue, John, on behalf of Puyallup Valley, JACL, we would like to just give you a simple certificate of appreciation. As a mainstream artist, you have a number of choices for themes that you could choose from. And we appreciate that you have chosen to honor our community and what happened in the city of Puyallup. So thank you very much. I have the privilege of introducing the next speaker. But before I do that, what I would like is, if you were a survivor of any of the wartime concentration camps, or if you had a family member who had to experience what happened during World War II, will you just raise your hands? Will you raise your hands? Oh my gosh. So this sculpture and this dedication is meant for you. And I appreciate, on behalf of Puyallup Valley, JACL, for you to come out and be a part of this dedication, of being a part of this recognition and honor of what you and your family experienced. Because now I'm going to introduce Cho Shimizu. Cho actually is a survivor not only of the wartime incarceration, but he and his family lived for 4 months on the Puyallup Fairgrounds, which is now the Washington State Fairgrounds, nicknamed Camp Harmony. And what Cho is going to describe to you is what many people, regardless of which assembly center they were in, because everything was, according to military and government specification. So much of what he is going to share is what many of you and your family members, regardless of where they were living, what their experiences were like. So, Cho Shimizu.
Thank you. Can you all hear me okay? Closer to the mic. Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon. Last September, I moved to Des Moines after spending 15 years in Puyallup. It is good to be back to Puyallup. I miss the farmers market and the Puyallup Activity Center over there, before the pandemic, I did volunteer work as a Medicare consultant for 15 years. In a way, the pandemic reminds me of another situation where I was confined from the outside world, not having the freedom to breathe fresh air, and stress was a norm. It was 80 years ago. I was just a 5-year-old youngster, bright eyes, lots of energy, and always thinking of adventures. However, in 1941, something happened. The United States was bombed. Everyone was in panic and hysteria. and my parents lived in fear. After all, they were immigrants from the country that bombed Pearl Harbor. We now were at war. President Roosevelt issued Executive Order 9066 in February 1942. It required the forced removal of all persons of Japanese ancestry, even American citizens and children, from their West Coast homes to concentration camps hundreds of miles inland. My family was given less than 10 days to pack up and show up at the interim Puyallup Assembly Center, where we would stay there until our permanent concentration camp would be available. We could only take what we could carry. The big question for us was, what were we going to carry and what were we going to leave behind? We carried mostly clothes, since there was a lot of us, and left everything else behind. We used bed sheets to carry our clothes. For 20 years, our family transformed wasteland in the Five Puyallup Valley into rich farmland. And now we would leave our crops ready to harvest. At the same time, we left all our equipment, all our furniture in our home. We never knew what happened to what we left behind, but we can guess. However, the one thing that the government could not take away from us was our heart and our soul, our culture, and our determination to provide future generations the American dream of a land in which life would be better for every person, with opportunity for each according to his ability. Despite all our uncertainty and fears, we still had hope. In my family's case, the family fairgrounds was designated as the interim assembly center until the permanent location in Idaho was completed. The government took 30 days to turn the fairgrounds into a compound which would house 7,400 to 7,800 people. Imagine what a facility that large would look like given only 30 days to complete. Our one room was 20 feet by 20 feet, adjacent to other rooms, forming a large barrack of adjacent homes. Our family of 12 was squeezed under one light bulb with no electricity, no water. In fact, some earlier arrivals from Alaska had blankets separating their family from the next family. The building itself was very haphazard, with leaky roofs, no foundation, and open walls at the top. Our initial food was rations and canned food, nothing we were used to. Our sanitation facilities were community facilities where we all shared the same showers and bathrooms, like cattle at the fairgrounds. The fairgrounds were divided into 4 areas, the 3 large parking lots and the main fairgrounds itself. Each area had 2 guard towers. with machine guns pointed at us, and they were all enclosed in barbed wire. After 4 or 5 months, our permanent concentration camp was available. We then went on a 2-day train ride into the dry, high desert country of Minidoka, Idaho, where temperatures would exceed 100 degrees in the summer and freeze below 0 degrees in the winter. The shades were drawn in the trains to prevent us from knowing where we were going. Imagine a 2-day train ride with our shades drawn. Again, we feared our destiny. My mother watched us kids like a mother hen. Before leaving, she would look out the half-closed shades on a window, which was half drawn, and wave to her friends, not knowing if she'll ever see them again. Despite what was going on, there were many non-Japanese who helped us try to make life easier for us. There were many churches, organizations, and businesses that would help store our valuables and other things for us. The Native Americans even tried to hang on to their land so that there will be land for us available when we came back on the farm. The nearby schools like Seattle's Leo Jackson provided sports equipment for kids by throwing balls, equipment over the barbed wire fence. There was even a family near one of the guard gates who converted their garage into a Goodwill-like facility, and the neighborhood would donate equipment and clothes so that we could have additional needs. Nurses, doctors, and teachers came into our compound for needed medical and educational needs. And looking back at those dark days, I am glad that my parents were alive when President Truman addressed the Nisei soldiers and said, "Not only did you not fight the enemy, but you fought prejudice and you won." My parents had 2 sons in the military at that time. My regret is that they did not live to hear the words of other leaders, especially President Reagan, when he offered his apology, noting that this was based on hysteria, racism, and leadership in government. And then when President Clinton said, "In the face of painful prejudice, they helped define America at its best." By they, he meant all people of Japanese ancestry. Thank you.
Thank you, Cho. As you can tell, Cho is a wonderful storyteller, and he has a great deal of courage to share his family's experience. So Cho, on behalf of Puyallup Valley, we would like to say thank you. And you know, Cho's story kind of gives you a personal background to what John's sculpture is all about. And between the 2 of them, what a powerful, powerful image and backstory. Thank you, Cho. Our next guest really has needs no introduction. We are very honored and pleased to have Lori Matsukawa join us to kind of give us a little bit broader view of what happened here in Puyallup. Lori was an award winner for her series on prisoners in their own land. And so I'm going to now turn it over to Lori Matsukawa to give us a perspective.
Thank you so much. We're trying to get the speaker up higher so more people can hear. All right, can the people in the back hear a little bit better? Good, good, good. Thank you, Cho. And a special thank you to Eileen Yamada-Lamphere, who invited me to participate today. She and the Puyallup Valley chapter of the JACL, among others, have been very instrumental in preserving the history of the Puyallup Fairgrounds, once known as Camp Harmony. So, Mayor Dorr, Mr. Hojam, Ms. Condra, Mr. Zylstra, and honored guests. One of the last things I did before retiring from King TV 2 years ago was a series of stories called Prisoners in Their Own Land. It was meant to cover the entire arc of the incarceration experience, living in the camps, also what happened to the families when they returned from camp. Life, of course, was very difficult. Many people couldn't find jobs, couldn't find housing, and were shunned by society. The series also explored the closely held story of the split between families whose sons fought in the war and those whose sons resisted being drafted or challenged the incarceration in court and therefore spent their war years in prisons. The division was so deep, some families do not speak to each other to this day. The series also looked at the political effort to achieve monetary redress for survivors, which was finally signed into law by President Reagan, Cho mentioned him, in 1988. The educational fund that was part of that bill provided for the creation of books, documentaries, displays, and art, like the art that we are dedicating today, to ensure that we as a nation do not forget this constitutional nightmare. The final part of the series dealt with continued storytelling, which is what we are doing today, especially through the arts. There are sculptures, there are books, there are films, there are musicals, there's even an opera describing the incarceration experience. And one of the most moving versions of this storytelling was spoken word by a younger generation whose grandparents and great-grandparents were those who went to the camps. The materials I used in the series I had saved over my years in broadcasting, some 40 years. They were interviews, books, first-person memoirs, because I wanted to leave a definitive piece in the King archives for future journalists who might never have heard about the incarceration or how the Pacific Northwest was a prominent part of it. In fact, the first families to go into camps were from Bainbridge Island, Washington. Earlier this year, I spoke to a class of third graders, and thank God for teachers who are teaching this in their classes. These kids were struck and deeply, These third graders were shocked and deeply saddened when I told them that those who were forced into camps could not take their pets. Elsie Taniguchi, a friend of mine, and Eileen, told me that as a girl at the fairgrounds, she had to stuff her own mattress with straw, and the family had to leave her cat behind. She told me, I never saw Fluffy again. That young people are so touched today by that sense of loss and separation speaks volumes about the damage the concentration camps caused back then, and why wholesale incarceration must not be repeated, ever. My series also shared acts of kindness that happened in the midst of this misery. How Frank Natsuhara, forced to leave Auburn for camp, left the keys to his agricultural store and home in the hands of Ray Sonneman, the owner of Sunset Laundry next door, and asked him to take care of the place. Ray Sonneman not only kept an eye on the Natsuhara's place, he drove to Minidoka Camp in Idaho when a fire damaged part of Frank Natsuhara's store, brought him back to Auburn to square things, then drove him back. Sonneman arranged for grounds maintenance at the Japanese cemetery in Auburn with money Natsuhara sent him from families living in Minidoka Camp. And when the Natsuhara family returned to their home 3 years later, there was electricity, hot water, and fresh sheets on the beds. And that, my friends, is my message today, that in times of challenge and oppression, we must choose kindness. We must stand up and be counted. We must choose to be the friend that helps a friend, like Ray Sonneman was to Frank Natsuhara. And above all, we have to pass on these stories, as we are doing today, to our future generations. So thank you for being here, and thank you for being part of the journey.
Thank you, Lori. And again, Lori is able to bring to you not only the history, but how it is relevant today. We're going to have a new influx of immigrants and refugees coming to our communities here in the Pacific Northwest. So how are we going to greet them? Are we going to greet them as being suspicious because of where they're coming from, because of the history that they bring? Or will we, as Lori demonstrated, will we open our arms and say, welcome? Because that's what the message is. And I think that is what Mr. Zylstra was saying when he created this beautiful sculpture. So Lori, thank you on behalf of Puyallup Valley JACF. And before I turn it back over to Becky, there are a few posters over here to my right, and they are actually a visual of Cho's story. He could talk, as John was going to, for an hour and a half, but we turned part of Cho's stories into some posters that you could take a look at. So thank you, everybody, for coming.
Both of our last two speakers were amazing, and it is always important to hear about the past so that we can learn from it and move forward into a better future. And in that thought, I would like to welcome Mr. Kent Hosham to the stage, CEO of the Washington State Fair.
Good afternoon and welcome, and thank you for the opportunity to participate in today's dedication ceremony. On behalf of the Fair Board of Directors and the entire Washington State Fair family, it is my pleasure to thank John Zylstra for his wonderful artwork, to recognize those who this artwork honors, and to remember why this is so important. In the spring of 1942, when the federal government commandeered the then Western Washington Fairgrounds in order to create the Puyallup Assembly Center, colloquially called Camp Harmony, our two communities, the over 7,500 Japanese American citizens incarcerated there, and the fair itself, became forever intertwined. It was a dark time in the history of the fair, but one that is laden with learning moments. Therefore, I believe it is our responsibility as the Fair family to acknowledge what happened here and to remain vigilant to ensure that it is never repeated. We will open a new fair museum at the 2022 fair, and thanks to the JACL and a dedicated group of volunteers, the most important adjunct to that will be an area immediately adjacent that is devoted solely to acknowledging the Puyallup Assembly Center. We hope that today the Nikkei community feels both remembered and honored, as this sculpture affords us the chance to not only reflect back on the experiences from so many years ago, but also to approach future issues of ethnicity and inclusion with thoughtful clarity. I speak for the Fair family when I say that we look forward to creating positive new family traditions that will be equally shared by all, and we applaud this dedication of a profoundly moving piece of artwork. Thank you.
And I'd like to take a moment to mention, those of you that have not actually seen the piece, it is located at the end of the library. You can see it through the trees right there. So be sure you check it out in person. At this time, I'd like to welcome to the stage Mayor Julie Dorr. You know, Mayor Dorr, when you look at this beautiful piece, it gives you a sense of peace and tranquility, but then when you look at the bottom, you see the barbed wire, and it makes you realize that peace is not something to be taken for granted. It is something that has to be cherished and honored and protected. And with that being said, Arts Downtown takes great pleasure in dedicating this sculpture not only to the Japanese American community, but also to the city of Puyallup, where we hope and pray that all cultures may live together in harmony.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here on a Sunday afternoon to celebrate with us. Today we celebrate the Japanese American community through this very impactful piece of art, Camp Harmony. But today we also must remember that there is a dark history behind this piece, a history that cannot and will not be forgotten, a history that we continue to learn from. The previous speakers here talked about Camp Harmony and its effects on families and individuals in our community and across the country. This piece should serve as a reminder that we must strive to do better, that we must ensure that history does not repeat itself. We must do better as a people and as a society. It is through encouraging discussions about societal issues, both past and present, that we will build a better future for all. With that being said, I'm proud to accept the dedication of this piece, Camp Harmony, by the talented John Zylstra, on behalf of the residents and the city of Puyallup. Thank you to Arts Downtown for commissioning this artist, and also for putting together such a fantastic remembrance. And to all of you, to all the dedicated, our special guests and our speakers, thank you for being here today to remember. May this piece stand as a fine example of of artistic expression, cultural significance, and remembrance for generations to come. Thank you.
All right, drummers, why don't you come up and get ready? I just have a couple of words, and Gary, we're going to need to move the speaker back down a little bit so they can get it. But anyway, again, thank you so very much for being here today. We're going to end our event today with another performance by the drummers. So when they finish, this event is over, but as you are leaving, please be sure to go by and see the diagrams and things that Cho brought. We also have some actual photographs of the Puyallup Assembly Center that are over here. And then also on the table are some brochures of Arts Downtown that includes a map so you can see where all of our sculptures are located. And last but not least, please be sure to pick up from one of the baskets on the stage a beautiful paper crane that you can take home with you. In Japanese American society, these signify blessings and good luck. So thank you to the talented people with nimble fingers who folded them, and thank you to everyone that helped make today possible. Thanks.
As we're getting set up, our final piece is going to be called Gendai ni Ikiru, which means to live in the present. So we invite you to come back to the present. And thank you for letting us be part of this event.